Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, July 18th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the 2022 governor elections. Now this morning, I released a video talking about the 2022 Senate elections, rather this afternoon. So just a few hours ago, I released my projection, and I thought that it would be accompanied by this governor prediction. Now typically I offset them by a day, but we have some interesting primaries that are occurring tomorrow that I want to actually cover more intently for tomorrow's video. So I decided to push this one off to today ahead of time. That way we could talk about the governor elections and see if anything really changes following the primaries tomorrow and some of the data that we might be seeing ahead of the July prediction, early August prediction that we can expect in just about 2 weeks. Now, the governor election projection is one that is a bit difficult to gauge, especially considering where we are on our national environment. Unlike House and Senate elections, governor elections are typically determined very much by candidate quality and candidate notability. Looking at some of these states, you have incumbent Republicans and Democrats in some solid red and blue states that might entirely defy the expectations when it comes down to congressional elections by voting for an opposing political party. For instance, on our map, you might be shocked to see the state of Vermont and New Hampshire as safe red states, but I would 100% stand behind that characterization and say that this makes sense. You have two governors there, both Republicans, who are very popular across the state, and despite Vermont being one of the most Democratic states in the country and New Hampshire being a swing state that most recently voted for President Biden, these states overwhelmingly approve of their Republican governors and are absolutely going to vote to re-elect them this November. The same thing can be said on the opposing side. There are some Democrats in some red states that are up for re-election. For instance, in Kansas, Laura Kelly is a Republican. Kansas voted for President Trump by over 15 points in the last election, yet there is a Democrat defending that seat. Looking across the nation, you might find some more surprises this evening that don't necessarily match up with what you see on my Senate election projections or see on the expectations in the House map from a bunch of notable pollsters, but at the end of the day, that's just the state of the nation, and that's just where these states are individually. So right now we're working with about 36 states that are up for re-election every 4 years, always coinciding with the midterms. Unlike Senate and House elections, they're not offset and don't occur every single election. So let's go ahead and take a look, looking at these 36 states, 2 of which you've already characterized. Let's go ahead and get started. So in a very similar fashion to the Senate maps, we are going to start off with our safe states. These are states where we know how they're going to go, and there really isn't much consideration of the opposing political party winning them, even if they were competitive in them 4 years ago or 8 years ago. So we're going to start off with the Republican Party, which currently holds the majority of governorships, but they actually do not hold the majority in terms of population and representation. The Democratic Party currently holds that, meaning that the Democratic Party represents more constituents and more people across the nation than Republicans do. That is the same case for the U.S. Senate and also the U.S. House map. It is interesting, though, because it is something that doesn't always correlate with statewide approval or not approval, but statewide victory. Looking at the nation, you have some states, even a weird way that the map could end up, where Democrats could win maybe 14, 15 states and still have the majority of the population on their side, just in terms of gubernatorial representation. So it really doesn't mean much in terms of overall party composition, but is still something to think about when you look at who's governing these states and what laws and what veto powers, etc., are going to be impacting more than half of the American population. So, like I said, let's go ahead and get started with the safe Republican states. These start off in the state of Idaho. I typically go from west coast to east coast, so let's go ahead and do that. Idaho is a safe red state, so is the state of Wyoming. These two shouldn't be surprises. What you might actually hear about Idaho is that there was a competitive primary between the lieutenant governor and the governor. Yes, the lieutenant governor decided to go after their own incumbent governor. It was a very interesting race. Donald Trump endorsed the lieutenant governor. That lieutenant governor lost that election. Now we're heading off into a regular election where the Republican is absolutely set to win. The next state I want to talk about is not Wyoming. We're going to jump over that one, but actually the state of South Dakota. Now, interestingly enough, in South Dakota in 2018, Kristi Noem, former U.S. House of Representatives member, current at that time, only won her governor race by about 4 points across the state. It was very, very close. It really was speaking to the blue wave year that it was, and also the electability of Billy Sutton in 2018. Now she's on track to have a very strong victory. She has been propped up by conservative media, glorified by Fox News, and lands herself in a very popular position across the state of South Dakota. Moving down to Nebraska, another safe red state, not really in consideration there for the GOP to lose that race, but there is something interesting about that primary I would definitely take a look at if I had the time, but not necessarily important to the general election. Oklahoma has an interesting race here where the Democratic nominee for governor is a previous Republican. What I mean by that is there is a Republican state superintendent who decided to actually switch to the Democratic Party because they believe that that would be the best way to challenge Governor Kevin Stitt. Now, this Republican had been a lifelong Republican, always voted with the GOP, but this time switched to the Democratic Party in order to run against her incumbent governor. At the end of the day, she is likely going to lose. Republicans have a very strong lockdown, especially in this year, in an already overwhelmingly red state. But surprisingly enough, Oklahoma has had some pretty competitive elections in years past. In 2018, Kevin Stitt only defeated Drew Edmondson, the Democrat, by about 12 points. Keep in mind, Trump wins here by 35 points. So to see that rapid of a reduction or that significant of a reduction between the 2016 and 2020 election results between 2018, just something to think about. We're going to jump over Arkansas. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, you might recognize her name from the White House. She's going to be the next governor from the state of Arkansas. Tennessee, safe red state. Alabama, a safe red state. South Carolina, I'm moving over from my likely red characterization. I think it's fair to characterize South Carolina right now as safe considering the national environment. If this was 2018, we might see a similar result such as this one where Henry McMaster was only winning by about 8 points. To show you a point of reference, not necessarily show you, I guess we actually can. Let's go ahead and do that because that makes a little bit more sense than me just explaining to you the margin. But when Nikki Haley was up in, I believe, 2014, her margin of victory there was only about 14.5. Now, keep in mind that 2 years after this, Donald Trump would be winning South Carolina by a similar amount. But 2014 was such a red wave year. I mean, even Maryland was a competitive state and Republicans won it. Same thing in Massachusetts. To see South Carolina only 14.5 is quite impressive for the Democratic Party. Idaho, quite surprising if you ask me. But let's head back over to the LTE projection. South Carolina, a safe red state. Another state I'm going to characterize as safe red is now the state of Iowa. New numbers out of the state show a 17-point lead, a whopping 17-point lead, might I add, for the incumbent Republican there. Not much going to be super surprising if it was a safe red state, but I will say that I didn't entirely expect this election cycle, but that's just how it is. So that brings the Republicans to a number of 20 seats in terms of just safe seats that they really don't need to worry about, that simply aren't going to be competitive. The Democrats on the flip side are currently at 6, but luckily for them, they have their own safe blue seats. We'll start off with the state of Hawaii, again, moving west coast to east coast. Then we have the state of California. Gavin Newsom was in an interesting race here. It did not end up being a recall that was successful. In fact, Gavin Newsom outperformed his 2018 margin of victory. Keep in mind, 2018 is a blue wave year in an already blue state. California, one of the bluest in the nation. Yet Gavin Newsom outperformed that in 2021. No real expectation that he would do worse than he did in 2018, or at least significantly enough worse that he would be in the likely lean or tilt column. He's going to easily sort a re-election this November in the state of California. Moving over to the next state, we have the state of Illinois. The Democratic Party locking it down. Their incumbent governor there, very popular, getting things done, and seems to be someone that the Democratic Party likes. And some people, even on election Twitter, seem to be floating as a potential 2024 name. Don't know exactly how viable that is, but it seems to be within consideration. So something to think about when you look at J.B. Pritzker again for his 2024 potential candidacy for president of the United States. But for right now, in terms of what we're focused on, the governor election there, safe blue. Moving over to the East Coast, you have two pickups. These pickups don't exactly come in the states that you might be expecting. Two states, which I talked about briefly, that went to the GOP in 2014, Maryland and Massachusetts. Yes, there are Republican governors in the two most Democratic states in the entire country. Maryland voted for Biden by over 30 points, as did Massachusetts, but at the same time, approval rating polls kept the Republican governors' approval ratings there, Charlie Baker in Massachusetts, Larry Hogan in Maryland, above water. And surprisingly enough, just something that's a little bit more personal, I live in both of these states, technically speaking. I'm in Massachusetts for college, I'm in Maryland where I've lived my entire life, and yet they have a very similar relationship with their governor, where despite him being a Republican, both of them obviously Republicans, they rank in the top 3 consistently in terms of popular governors across the nation, yet are simultaneously both hated by their statewide GOPs, meaning their approval ratings are elevated by Democrats. But now, one of them isn't running in Massachusetts due to a primary threat, which he can't avoid. Donald Trump already endorsed Charlie Baker's opponent, calling Charlie Baker a rhino. Charlie Baker withdrew from the race, decided not to run for a third term. Larry Hogan is term limited, and as a result, removing these popular governors means these states return back to their roots in an open race. What you find, they become solid blue. Democrats going to pick them up. And the reason why this isn't the same as 2014, because their replacements are much more extreme than they were in 2014. 2014, both of these candidates were moderates, running against Democrats that didn't exactly have the best chance at victory. This time around, the Democratic Party on both sides are fielding their best candidates. In addition to that, the GOP simply isn't. So, Maryland and Massachusetts, our first pickups of the evening, both safe blue states. New York is another state I would characterize as safe blue, and that really shouldn't surprise too many people. Kathy Hochul just easily won, or is going to easily win her primary there, or did, actually. I'm not entirely sure if I'm remembering correctly. I just know that the primary should have been in August, so maybe it got pushed up. I don't think that it did, but regardless, we know who the nominees are going to be. And for right now, New York is going to be a safe blue state. So that leaves us, I don't know why I was saying ahead of that, leaves us with 18 quote-unquote toss-up races. Now, not all of these are going to be toss-ups. As I say all the time in my predictions, we have some likely states. So these are states that are decided between 5 and 15%, and there are a bunch of them on this map. Since we started off with Republicans before, let's start off with Democrats this time and take a look at some of the states where they are likely to win re-election this upcoming November. So, in the East Coast, we have Connecticut and Rhode Island. These two states, I really don't think it should be too much of a surprise that we can characterize them as likely blue. I think more of the surprise comes from the fact that they're not safe blue, but looking at other midterms, blue and red waves, they're typically competitive. Republicans sometimes win these races, but I just think that they'll narrow down to 12 to 13 point margins for the Democratic Party, which is enough to characterize them as likely blue. Moving over to the next states that I would characterize as likely blue, we have the states of Colorado and New Mexico. Now, New Mexico, with Mark Ronchetti, could become surprisingly more competitive. But for Colorado, I don't think so. Jared Polis is a popular governor, and I think that's going to carry him across the finish line very, very easily. Michelle Lujan Grisham, I'm a bit apprehensive about keeping it as likely blue. For right now, until I see more data confirming that this race has narrowed up, I will say that I am still confident in her ability as a Democrat to win in a Democratic state. But as we have seen, for instance, in Virginia in 2021, you can't exactly rely on a 2020 margin of victory to carry you to victory in a year against President Biden. But I can also say that it is the same type of race. Virginia was an open race. Incumbents can't run for re-election. I mean, technically speaking, Terry McAuliffe was running for re-election, but he certainly was not the incumbent. In addition to that, he's not exactly someone who soared in terms of his high levels of popularity. Ralph Northam, neither did he. And looking at Glenn Youngkin, he was a different type of Republican that I can't say either of these two Republicans in Colorado or New Mexico are replicating. There's a reason why Glenn Youngkin will win, or did win, and many other Republicans simply will not. They're not one size fits all, and they certainly do not all act the same, nor campaign the same. For right now, Colorado remains a likely blue state, as does New Mexico. In the next two states I'm going to characterize as likely blue, we have Minnesota and Michigan. Now, right now, all of the data consistently in Minnesota seems to be telling us that Tim Walz is on track to re-election. It's not just that, it's his level of approval, and it's also his 2018 victory, which means he has a significant amount of room to fall. For instance, if he was in neighboring Wisconsin, Tony Evers defeated Scott Walker by about 1.1%. There isn't a lot of room to fall there. Versus Minnesota, Tim Walz has about an 11-point victory that he has room to fall from. Even a Virginia swing from 2017 to 2021 wouldn't even move Minnesota into the red column. For right now, I'm confident Tim Walz is going to win. I can't say the GOP has the best type of candidates either, but we will see what happens this November. Michigan, on the other hand, what a complete and total show. I'm not going to say that word because I just simply don't want to, but you get what I'm trying to say. Michigan is in a complete and total state of disarray for the Republican Party. They've gone through 5 candidates that were disqualified from the race due to illegitimate and forged signatures. They have their other frontrunner that was arrested by the FBI on January 6th charges. And now they're solidifying down to 4 candidates with the reemergence of that previous frontrunner, who is, surprisingly enough, or maybe not so much, still the frontrunner narrowly, but likely going to be overtaken by another Republican contender here, but is still making headway on the media and in polls. Looking at it so far, I think Gretchen Whitmer has really lucked out, as have other Democrats and Republicans in years against them. And I think Michigan is going to be one of those races where it was entirely winnable before, where the expectations before were that the GOP was going to win it, but that simply is no longer the case. Michigan, a likely blue state. So that brings the Democrats up to 18, but unfortunately for them, even with the likely characterizations, they don't match where the Republican Party is safe. And that really just comes down to the fact that people don't vote cross parties. They simply vote how they voted on the presidential level in most states. Obviously, some exceptions, as you see those solid red states in the Northeast, in Vermont and New Hampshire. The Republican Party also has some likely states that will add to their already high lead on the Democratic Party. Amongst the 12 remaining states, you have a good amount that are likely red states straight off the bat that will reach them at a point where they really don't need to worry about a majority. But technically speaking, that majority really doesn't matter. We're going to start off on the West Coast. We have the state of Alaska. The reason why I characterize this as likely red is because of the new ranked choice voting system, which could threaten Mike Dunleavy, the incumbent Republican governor there, who, potentially speaking, might be ousted by the former independent Bill Walker, who actually won back in 2014. When you take a look at the 2014 election results, you will be surprised to see that the state of Alaska had a pickup for the GOP against Sean Parnell there. Bill Walker won by 2.2%. You look at the election from 4 years prior in 2010, it went to Sean Parnell by 21.4%. So when you go to 2018, you might be surprised to see that it actually went red because Bill Walker was running. Then the Democrats said, no, we want Mark Begich. He's a former senator. He knows how to win in Alaska. And the independent governor says, okay, I'll step back. I'll allow you to run, but I'm coming back. And that's exactly what he did. He decided to run this time around. Democrats are also running someone, but because of ranked choice voting, there will be no such thing as vote splitting or wasting your vote in the state of Alaska. Moving over to the next state that we can characterize as likely red, the state of Texas. Greg Abbott has been in a pretty comfortable position over Beto O'Rourke. As much as Beto O'Rourke would like to win this race, it doesn't seem too winnable, and realistically speaking, Greg Abbott is on track for a third term. The next state we're going to characterize as likely red, the state of Florida. Ron DeSantis really speaks for himself. Very electable guy, very popular guy. I can't exactly say but this is something that many people expected, especially following his 2018 election result, where the state of Florida was extremely competitive. But this time around, I mean, this could really be a very important election, not only for 2022, but also for 2024. I would definitely take a look at that in the future. The next state I'm characterizing as likely red, the state of Georgia, and I will also accompany it by the state of Ohio. Two incumbents that seem to be outperforming their Senate counterparts. Two things that are going to be interesting. Number one, the state of Georgia, Stacey Abrams is running again. This will be a testament as to whether or not she can improve. Realistically speaking, if she's in the likely red column on my map, she probably isn't going to win and probably isn't going to do better than she did previously, as much as Democrats would have liked that she did. Number two, the other thing that I would take a look at is the state of Ohio. We will see what really matters to candidates here, what matters to voters in the state of Ohio. On one hand, you have J.D. Vance, not necessarily the best guy that Democrats or Republicans could have ran for the U.S. Senate. They also have an incumbent here in the governor's race, that Mike DeWine, who came into a competitive primary, who did end up winning it, but the fact that they even faced a strong primary opponent in the first place is quite surprising and might be a testament to an inability to win the race by an overwhelmingly large margin. So we will see what happens. If there's a lot of crossover, not so much, we will see the true test of that this November. But for right now, both Ohio and Georgia, I'm safe characterizing them as likely red states as of right now. And in the remaining 7 toss-up races, Republicans are at 25, Democrats are at 18, which means Democrats, technically speaking, need to win every single remaining race to just tie the Republican Party. Again, it doesn't really matter in terms of party composition. This is not some national governing body, but it definitely is something that in terms of party control and in terms of just statewide victories in a new wave, a new era, where governors now are so much more important, whether it's voting rights or abortion access or whatever else the Supreme Court decides to throw our way. We are going to see a very big revitalized importance and focus on governor elections where they typically have been thrown and shoved under the rug by the mainstream media to really focus on congressional elections. Both of them are going to be so important this November and other elections. So in the remaining 7 races, let's go ahead and continue with our characterizations. The important thing here is that moving forward, most of these states that I've characterized thus far, I have been very careful and comfortable characterizing them the way I have. But for these remaining 7 states, I wouldn't be surprised if they completely went against what my prediction was and voted for the opposite party. Because now we're getting into lean and tilt states, which means the margin of expected victory for right now is below 5%. So keeping that in mind, take with that what you will, because it is important when you're looking at this map, because it could go very well for the GOP, but also very good for the Democratic Party. And it's definitely something to think about when you look at this governor map. So just keep it in mind, realize that things can change left and right depending on the national environment. But as of right now, this is where I personally believe these states are going to go. So let's go ahead and head into it. Starting off on the West Coast, we have the state of Oregon, which is going to be, in my opinion, a lean blue state. Now, that might surprise you, but looking at 2018, Oregon was actually competitive. Incumbent Democratic Governor Kate Brown only won by 7 points. And looking at the expected and predicted margin of victory here, the Democrat only has about a 70% chance at winning. For reference, Biden had a 99% chance at winning the state of Oregon in the 2020 election. Now, this isn't necessarily a red wave thing turning on Democrats. That might add to it, but as you saw in a blue wave year, Oregon was still competitive. I think it just goes to show that incumbents here and Democrats and Republicans really find themselves in competitive races, even if they don't so much on the presidential level. Just something to think about. But for Nevada and Arizona, I'm going to characterize both of these states as tilt blue states. Now, that might not necessarily be something that you are entirely expecting. Some pundits, including FiveThirtyEight, have Nevada and Arizona in different directions. Arizona red, Nevada blue. I stand by that blue characterization for Nevada. But Arizona, I think that we are missing something with Katie Hobbs. She's not Mark Kelly and she's not Kristen Sinema in terms of electability, but she is a viable option for the Democratic Party and probably one of their better choices, considering who they had. In addition to that, Kari Lake is not this GOP renowned candidate that people are building her up to be. Sure, she might win in the state of Arizona, but I can't say that she would do better than practically any other top-tier Republican across the state, because quite frankly, she simply doesn't match them. If Republicans had another Doug Ducey to run, this race would be likely Republican and have stayed that way during the entirety of my forecast. But because the GOP wants to nominate someone such as Kari Lake, I'm not confident in their ability whatsoever. I think Katie Hobbs is still going to win this race. I could be wrong, as I have said, and maybe I'll be wrong, and I probably will be wrong about some of these states. But I don't necessarily think I'll be wrong about Arizona. But then again, it is still very much up in the air. But that's just my 2 cents on the race itself. For this state of Kansas, I'm going to characterize it as a lean red state. I could be convinced to make it a likely red state. Not much data out of the state. I also want to see what happens in the primary when it comes down to the abortion referendum. That really could change my mind on some of these races, specifically in the state of Kansas. We'll see what happens. But for right now, I'm comfortable characterizing it as a lean red state. Moving over to the Rust Belt, the state of Wisconsin, I'm going to characterize as tilt red. Now, some people, including FiveThirtyEight and other forecasters, might disagree with my tilt red characterization. I don't think Tony Evers is going to win. I think his narrow margin in 2018, Biden's narrow margin in 2020, and also just Ron Johnson's ability to win the Senate election and House Republicans likely going to win the Senate elections in the House elections in the state of Wisconsin. Just nothing seems to be moving in the right direction right now for Tony Evers. I could be convinced that he's going to win, but right now I'm going to stand by my characterization that I've held for a couple of months now, that Wisconsin is a tilt red state. But lucky news for the Democratic Party, they practically win their blue wall back in the state of Pennsylvania. I'm characterizing it as a lean blue state. I think Josh Shapiro will win. The question is, what does he win by? I could be persuaded to see a 5 to 6 point victory, but I also am in a bit of a bit of an expectation that the state of Pennsylvania will be close no matter who's running, no matter what is happening, because of where we are nationally. The state of Pennsylvania, had this been the matchup in 2018, would be a very similar result to what we saw. I think Tom Wolf, being replaced with Josh Shapiro, would have defeated Scott Wagner, being replaced with Doug Mastriano, by a very overwhelming margin. But because of where we are right now, and also a decreased sense of urgency for governor candidates and also the Democrats in general, Pennsylvania is most comfortable in my map as a lean blue state. Still a victory for the Democrats. They still retain control of the governorship for the next 4 years, but definitely something to think about, and definitely going to be a closer race than I think some people might be expecting in that race, until proven otherwise. And in the final state, we have the state of Maine. We're going to see here the former Republican governor, Paul LePage, return to run for governor again, someone who has proclaimed himself the Trump before President Trump. I think that this is going to be a lean blue state. I think the governor here, Janet Mills, definitely faced strong opposition in 2018, only won by about 7 points. Biden won by 9 in a less favorable year for the Democratic Party. But I will say that Paul LePage isn't exactly someone who strikes me as an impressive Republican candidate. The expected margin here is about 6 points. I think it'll be narrower than that, but I do think that the state of Maine will go to the Democratic Party and that Maine will retain its blue blue characterization and will prop up the Democratic Party to 23 seats. So as it stands right now, following the most recent election, the Republican Party has 28 seats, Democrats have 22. This time on this map, Democrats actually gain a seat. That comes as a result of Democrats winning in the state of Arizona, losing the state of Wisconsin, losing the state of Kansas, but winning in Maryland and Massachusetts and also Pennsylvania. What you're finding here is that Democrats are likely going to pick up one individual governorship that will put them, or net one individual governorship, but still pick up a couple of them. Republicans also picking up a couple as well. That results in a very similar map to what we had before, except this time a few things changing across the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt, and also some states in the middle of the country changing partisanship, along with the Northeast seeing a little change in leadership altogether. So 27-23 Republicans retain their governor majority, still in leadership in the National Governors Association, but it will be interesting to see 4 years from now how much actually has changed, considering that this map seems to be, practically speaking, an incumbent party's re-election party, where almost all of them, Republican and Democrat, are winning their re-election bids. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 governor election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.